Hi, so this is entitled The Generation of the Flood, Learning Theology from Cows and Chickens. What do I mean by this? So there's a question maybe you've wondered about. We're talking for a few weeks now about the flood at the time of Noach and how mankind had completely perverted its ways and was involved in and thievery and taking advantage of the poor and the helpless. And we've talked about how the judges, people in power and influence, took advantage of women. So it was a society that was completely corrupt. God decided to clean slate, start again. But what about the animals? And what about even farmlands and all that? Why did that have to be destroyed as well? So you could give an answer. There's a famous Basar Hishis Kol Basar that everything got perverted. Whatever sexual perversion was going on in mankind was mirrored by the animal world, and even, believe it or not, in the agricultural world in some way. But you have to wonder, though, it's really mankind who was the one who started it all. So again, why punish the animal world and even things that grow? I mean, the Torah is full of prohibitions against about tashkis, about destroying things that have value, any kind of material things that have value, any kind of wasting any kind of resources. There's tzar balachayim. There are laws about not tormenting animals. There's even laws about not cutting down fruit trees during a war. I mean, there is tremendous sensitivity in the Torah to these kind of things, so it sort of strengthens the question. So the Midrash actually answers the question, but as you will see, the answer really needs some interpretation because it seems to fly in the face of what you would expect. The Midrash says, I'm going to give you a parable, and the parable is there's a king who hires what's called a pedagogue, which is like a tutor, a very smart person who teaches privately, and he hires a pedagogue for his son, the prince. Obviously, he's grooming the prince, and he wants him to study up on all kinds of things. And if you can imagine, maybe this pedagogue is teaching him agronomy and economy and languages and history and all kinds of things that a great leader would need to know to have perspective and relate to his people. And instead, everything goes haywire. Perhaps this pedagogue teaches the prince communism, socialism, whatever it is. By the end of the day, it seems that everything has gone awry, and the prince perhaps is actually looked upon by the king as someone who's going to lead an insurrection against him, a foe. He turned his own son against him. And so the king has no choice. He has to take the life of his own son. And then, of course, he looks at the pedagogue and says, you did it. You're responsible for all this. I'm going to take your life as well. And so the nimshal, so what does that mean? So obviously the prince, it represents humankind, mankind. And the rest of the ones who sort of were responsible, the animal world and agriculture, that's the pedagogue who taught them. Of course, quite mysterious, right? Since when are we getting messages, as the headline said, from cows and chickens and wheat and grains and all that? So the commentaries are sort of very brief. They all talk about the fact that there was tremendous amount of wealth, and with the wealth came a lot of feeling of of power, and that all emerged from having lots of livestock and lots of farmland. In other words, people lived a very, very comfortable life, and somehow this is supposed to solve the riddle of this parable. So let me put it in another way. If you in those days, as I said, when you acquire a lot of wealth and you start to believe that the wealth really comes from your doing, and this is a famous concept in the Torah, which is used, unfortunately, in the Tochacha, the rebuke of the Jewish people later on. It's called Kochiva Utzem Yodi. In other words, there's a certain malaise that sets in when you're living with many creature comforts, then all of a sudden you believe these creature comforts are sort of sending you a signal or almost teaching you a spiritual negative lesson. And that lesson is, this is your doing. This is the strength of your handiwork. This is your brilliance. It's your hard work. You have achieved all this. God is out of the picture. So it's almost like you're being taught these lessons. They're emanating from all this wealth and materialism and comfort. To give you an example, let's say somebody was doing very well and they bought a big mansion. So it's two ways of looking at it. You could look at that mansion and say, wow, God has blessed me with so much. I'm going to open up my home to help feed the poor, to have more guests, to take care of my parents, whatever it is, so that every time you walked into your home, it would sort of be sending you these spiritual messages saying, look at all the good you can do. Look at all the appreciation to God you can have. It's all coming from this gift that God gave you. It's all from God, and I'm going to turn it into something. I'm going to use the opportunity. I'm going to make it into something which generates more goodness. So then, your mansion becomes like a spiritual mentor of yours. On the other hand, if you walk into your house and say, wow, look at the beautiful spiral staircases, and look at the amazing handcrafted woodwork, and look at the Italian marble and all this, and then you say, it's incredible how I've done so well that I got to this level, amazing, and I have a pool and I have manicured grounds, amazing. So then this mansion is sending you message as well. It becomes like your pedagogue. It's reinforcing the idea that it was you, Kochi B'Atzem Yadi, it was you that achieved all this. God was not part of it. It's all your work. And then it becomes a way to disconnect further from God, because you get so built up in your belief in yourself, you're almost worshiping yourself. So that, I think, is the explanation of this mysterious example that the Midrash gave about the king and the pedagogue. Depending on how you relate to material wealth, your mansion can either be sending you spiritual messages and almost be a spiritual mentor for you, or it can be opposite. It could be like the cows and the chickens and the livestock and the agriculture that of the days of Noach. Have a great Shabbat.